Hi, I'm Linda Matthews, and in this video I'll be showing you a unique way to use printable junk journal pages to make a creative stitched mixed media journal. To make this journal, I've used my printable journal kit Summer Garden. However, you can use any printable journal kit or printable pages to make this type of journal. The pages are sewn together using a sewing machine, and once the journal is assembled, the pages can then be creatively embellished with fabric and lace scraps, images and quotations, and beads and charms. I've also designed a creative fabric journal cover that's easy to assemble, with a pocket on the front that's made by manipulating the fabric on the front cover. To get started with your journal, you first need to print the journal pages. The pages should be printed onto cardstock as they need to be somewhat rigid. 110 pound or similar weight cardstock is ideal for this type of journal. These particular printable journal pages are sized to finish at 5 inch by 7 inch, which is a perfect size for making a handmade journal. The pages should be printed on one side of each piece of cardstock. Once printed, cut the pages to size, then cut them in half. Each page should measure 5 inches wide by 7 inches high. You'll need 4 single pages to make one signature. For this journal, I've included 4 signatures, but you could include more if you wanted to. 4 signatures will give you a journal approximately 1 inch thick. You'll also need 2 additional single pages for the front and back cover. For this printable journal, we're going to make the journal first and then attach the embellishments to the pages once it's completed. In this way, you'll have a blank journal already made, and then you can embellish the pages whenever inspiration strikes or you have the time. Once the pages are cut to size, now it's time to sort them and assemble them into signatures. For each signature, you'll need 4 single pages, so sort each signature into 2 page sets with the pages assembled back to back. Then put a paper clip at the top of each page set to hold them together. Arrange the page sets in the order that they will be inserted into your journal as signatures. Then attach a paper clip to each signature. The paper clips will help you to remember how the pages are to be assembled. Each of the page sets will be sewn together back to back, so align the edges of the pages evenly and hold them together using paper clips. Then sew close along the top, outer edge and bottom of each page set using the straight stitch on your sewing machine. Each page set will then be joined to make a signature by sewing a strip of fabric down the middle. If the pages are not evenly aligned after you've finished sewing them, simply cut away the excess with a pair of scissors. Once all the page sets are sewn together, it's time to make the signatures, and this is done by machine sewing strips of fabric down the center to join the pages together. To make it easy to sew the pages, align the unsewn edges of each page set side by side on a flat surface. Then cut some small pieces of masking tape or sticky tape and tape the pages together. Cut or tear 2 strips of fabric per signature, about 1 to 1.5 inches wide and slightly longer than the page. These particular strips are 1.25 inches wide. Run a glue stick down the centre as a way to temporarily hold the fabric in place while you sew. Centre and position one fabric strip on one side and the other fabric strip on the other side. Once the fabric strips are positioned, machine sew them down each side and across the top and bottom. You can use a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch or even a decorative stitch if your sewing machine has them. Once the fabric strips are sewn, cut away the excess fabric at the top and bottom, fold the pages and press lightly with an iron down the fabric edge to make a permanent fold. The cover for this journal is made using Peltex double-sided fusible heavyweight stabilizer, which is a very thick type of stabilizer that is suitable for sewing. If you're unable to get hold of Peltex, you can easily make your own. You can find the link to that tutorial in the description below. You'll need to cut 1 piece each for the front and back covers and 1 piece for the spine. Cut the front and back pieces 1/4 inch wider and longer than the pages. The pages for this journal are 7 inches high by 5 inches wide when folded, so I've cut 2 pieces of stabilizer 7.25 inches high by 5.25 inches wide, just large enough for the pages to sit inside. Cut the spine section 1/4 inch longer than the height of the pages and wide enough to fit your signatures, allowing 1/4 inch for each signature. I've cut this spine section 1 inch wide by 7.25 inches high. I have 4 signatures that will be sewn in at about 1/4 inch apart. On your sewing machine, sew the front and back cover pieces to the spine section using a wide zigzag stitch. When sewing, I've left a very slight gap in between the spine section and the front and back pieces just to make it easier to fold the cover. After you've sewn the cover interfacing pieces together, now it's time to cut the pieces of fabric for the cover. You'll need 1 piece for the inside lining, 1 piece for the outside, and 1 piece for the insert that goes underneath the front pocket. For the lining, cut a piece of fabric about 1 inch longer in width and height than the cover. For the outside cover, cut a piece of fabric about 3 inches longer in width and 1 inch longer in height than the cover. The extra fabric on the width will give you enough fabric to play around with to create the front pocket. Then what's not used can be cut off. For the insert on the front that goes underneath the pocket, cut a piece of fabric the full size of the front cover, plus about 1/2 inch along the top, bottom and sides. The cover also uses printable junk journal pages that are stitched to the front and back sections. The fabric on the front will need to be manipulated into folds down the right side to create the pocket. To get started assembling the cover, first position the fabric for the outside cover and iron it to the fusible interfacing along the back and spine sections only, leaving the fabric unattached on the front section. When using fusible Peltex stabilizer, press the fabric for a few seconds, working section by section until the surface has been completely pressed. Next, position the fabric insert on the outside front cover underneath the loose fabric and iron in place. Once the fabric for the outer cover is attached, select 2 printable pages printed onto cardstock for the front and back cover. The cover printables should be the same size as the page printables. To help position the printables on the cover, you can make a crease on the fabric by running your fingernail around the edge of the stabilizer. This makes a visible crease that you can use as a guide to position the printables. Use a glue stick to temporarily hold the printables in place while you sew them on your sewing machine. Then sew the printables to the cover close around the edges using a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch or even a decorative machine stitch. To manipulate the fabric on the front for the pocket, first pin the fabric a 1/4 inch in from the left edge of the front cover. This will ensure that the edge of the printable doesn't show. Then play around with folding the fabric in different ways until you're happy with the way things look. First, fold the top right corner under and gather some pleats along the right edge. The results will look different depending on the angle that you fold under and the amount of fabric that you pleat. Doing it this way, there should be enough fabric for 2 or 3 pleats that create nice waves running from the top left to the bottom right. Pin the fabric in place so you can see better how this will look. There's no right or wrong way to do this, so have fun with it. In the end, I folded the underside over to the front and created several folds. I added a few hand stitches over the folds at the top to anchor them and keep them from unfolding, and then began playing around by adding some scraps of fabric in between the folds to make things look a little more interesting. Once I had the fabric scraps positioned, I hand sewed them in place. Once the front pocket section is complete, iron the lining fabric to the underside of the stabilizer. Pin the front section in place, then machine sew close around the edge of the stabilizer. You can easily tell where the edge of the stabilizer is by running your fingernail along the edge. This should leave a visible crease in the fabric. When sewing, make sure to sew as close to the outside edge of the stabilizer as possible. I like to use a stitch-in-the-ditch machine foot because it has a center guide that makes it easy to line up against the edge of the stabilizer. However, you could also use your fingernail to run along the edge to create a visible crease that you could use as a sewing guide. After you've finished sewing, using a ruler and rotary cutter or a pair of sharp scissors, cut away the excess fabric from the cover about a 1/4 inch away from the sewn edges. If your fabric tends to fray, apply a line of fray check around the edge. Fray check is a lightweight fabric glue that will prevent fraying. Before sewing the signatures into the cover, you'll need to make some hole templates, one for the pages and one for the cover. Using a template makes it much easier to sew the signatures in. For this journal, I'll be sewing the pages using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. To make a page template, cut a piece of paper 2 inches wide by the length of the page. Fold in half lengthways and make a crease down the middle. Using a Sharpie, mark dots 1 inch in from each end and 1 in the middle. Then, using an awl or a large embroidery needle, punch holes through all the dot marks. Position the page template along the centre fold of the signature, and using an awl, punch through each of the holes and through the fabric in the signatures. Do this for each of the signatures. To make a cover hole template, cut a piece of paper the width of the spine on your journal by the length of the journal cover. My journal cover has a 1-inch spine and is 7 1/4 inches long. Using a pencil, draw lines along the length of the template where the signatures will be positioned. I have 4 signatures and I'm going to sew the first and last signatures 1/8 inch in from each end, with the other 2 spaced about 1/4 inch apart. Then draw lines across the width, matching the dimensions of the page template. Using a Sharpie, mark dots on the template where each of the lines cross. Then using an awl, punch holes through each of the dot marks. Position the template along the spine and using a Sharpie, make a mark through each of the holes onto the fabric underneath. As this is dark fabric, I'm using a white gel pen instead of a Sharpie so I can see the markings better. Using an awl, punch holes through all the markings. Now it's time to sew in the signatures. Cut a length of strong embroidery thread or bookbinding thread about twice the length of the page and thread it through a large embroidery needle. I like to first run my thread through some thread wax because it reduces the risk of tangling and getting knotted. With the first signature positioned inside the cover and starting with the middle hole, push the needle through the signature and through the centre hole in the cover. Leave a 3 to 4 inch tail of thread inside the signature. This will be used to tie off the thread once the signature is sewn in. Push the needle through the next hole on the cover, back to the inside and through the signature. Then back to the outside through the middle hole. Then back to the inside through the last hole. Make sure the thread is taut, then tie the thread off in a secure knot and trim away the excess. Sew the remaining signatures into the cover in the same way. After the signatures have been sewn in, you can finish off the final touches to the cover. I decided to finish the cover by adding a fabric strip to hide the stitches on the spine. I also added a ribbon tie closure and several small fabric collages as embellishments. I made the small fabric collages by layering fabrics and stitching them to a piece of tearaway stabilizer. Then I glued the pieces to the cover using a glue stick. For the spine, I cut a strip of fabric the width and length of the spine, glued it to a piece of tearaway stabilizer, then sewed on some ribbon with buttons along the length. I glued this strip to the spine using a glue stick. I attached the ribbon tie closures in the same way. I layered some lace and fabric onto a piece of tearaway stabilizer, tucked the ribbon underneath, then added a button on top. I used pins to mark the middle where the ribbon would be attached, and then glued the pieces to the cover. There are no right or wrong ways to use the pages of your printable journal. They can be used to display images, your favourite quotations, or creative fabric collages. You can leave the pages blank, use them for journal writing, or embellish them with pockets, tags, or fabric scraps and stitches. To make it easy to embellish the pages, any attachments or embellishments you want to add to the pages should first be sewn onto a piece of tearaway stabilizer and then glued onto the page. To make a stitched and embellished journal card, cut a lined page to size, gather some fabric and lace scraps, then lay them out onto a piece of tearaway stabilizer and play around with the layout until you're happy with the way things look. Once you have a layout that you're happy with, then glue the pieces to the stabilizer section by section to hold them in position while you sew them together by hand or machine. I sometimes like to use the design on the printed page as inspiration for how I might embellish the page. This bird image was perfect to use as a small embellishment for a page with flowers on the corner. I added a few small scraps of lace and fabric and glued and sewed it to a backing of tearaway stabilizer before gluing it to the page. Embellishments don't have to be complex or complicated. A few scraps of fabric and lace is sometimes all that's needed. These types of printable junk journal pages are perfect for displaying your favourite quotations. I typed this quotation in a word editing program and printed it out. Then I tore away the edges and added a few scraps of fabric and a metal charm, and sewed it to a piece of tearaway stabilizer before gluing it onto the page. To make a pocket, print out a printable page, fold it in half and cut to size so that it fits on the page. I'm going to sew some lace and ribbon trim along the top before gluing it to the page. Continue to fill the pages with small fabric collages, images and quotations, or whatever type of embellishment you like. You could also embellish the edges of the pages with a few hand stitches or fabric tabs here and there, just to make them look more interesting. I hope you're inspired by these ideas and use them as inspiration to make your own unique stitched mixed media journal using printable junk journal pages. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also visit my website where you'll find free tutorials and printables for creative journaling.